Hi, I'm Jodie and this is the Jodie Makes podcast. I've got a lot to talk about today, so I'm just going to get straight into it with finished objects. My first finished object is the checker plate hat by Lily Kate France. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to insert a picture because I've not got it with me today. It was a gift for my partner and he's gone to the office today and he's wearing the hat. But I will pop a little picture in just here for you. In terms of project stats, I cast this on the 8th of January and bound it off on the 30th of January. So it was on my needles for a total of 22 days. I cast this on using some Drops Alaska that I had in stash and that was £1.90 per ball. I did end up needing to use 2 skeins for the project. So that's £3.80 for my total yarn cost. The pattern was £4.50, which means the total project cost on this one of £8.30. If you watched my previous podcast, you'll know that I cast this on using an Aran weight yarn and the pattern calls for a worsted weight. Now, unfortunately, this pattern does only come in one size, so there was nothing I could do in terms of moving up or down a size to accommodate for the larger gauge. And my partner has said that it's not quite as snug fitting around the head as he'd have liked it to have been. He's quite happy with the depth of the hat. But it just liked it to have been a little bit tighter, and that's definitely because I use an Aran weight yarn rather than the suggested worsted weight. I've not got any worsted weight in my stash and I'm not really interested in welcoming some worsted weight into my stash just because it's not a yarn weight that I use particularly frequently, and it's the type of thing where when I eventually get some remnants of it I'm going to struggle to use it up. So I think I would like to try casting on in a DK weight yarn and just seeing how far that moves the needle in terms of the sizing of the project. And the next finished object that I got to show you this week is Caroline the cow. So here she is. I don't know if my daughter's going to call her Caroline, so this is a birthday present for my soon-to-be 4-year-old, and it's not her birthday yet, so I've not had to give this over, which is why I've got access to it. I've made a couple of modifications to this. So the first one being this pattern calls for, I think, DK weight yarn, and I have used a chunky weight, so the cow is a little bit bigger than the pattern suggests. And because I sized up in the yarn, I also sized up in the hook size, so I think it recommends to cast on with a 3 or 4 millimeter hook, and I used a 5.5 millimeter hook for this. And I also sized up the safety eyes again to accommodate for the fact that my cow turned out a little bit larger than expected. The other modification that I made is that in the pattern you make 4 patches for the cow. It's supposed to be like I don't know how you describe the normal pattern. It's supposed to have like the patches on that a cow has, and I did make a couple of those and I just didn't like the finish on mine. I don't know if it's the yarn that I use that's slightly different to the yarn that's in the pattern. I just didn't like it. I preferred it without those, and so I just left those off. I really enjoyed the pattern. I thought it was really easy to follow and really straightforward in terms of holding your hand through most of the steps. I did find some of the sewing a little bit tricky, so I think I mentioned last time I'd finished the head and the way that you attach the ears. There wasn't huge amounts of instruction on that, so they are a little bit floppy, but I'm really happy with the way that you attach the horns, and the legs and the arms were really easy. And it does also have a little tail at the back. But yeah, hopefully my daughter really likes this. I think it's really cute. It's a really good size. I know that that's not really part of the pattern, but if you were to do what I've done and cast on in James C. Brett Flutterby, which is a chunky weight yarn, it's just a nice chenille, and a really soft, it gives like a really snuggly finish. And then what I tend to do with my stuffed toys, so I do have some scraps of actual toy filling from previous projects. I have had a couple of projects where I've stuffed them with like old pillows where we've gotten rid of them because they've gotten a little bit past their best and they're not great to use, but you can sort of shred that stuff in and use that for toys. But I also think that toys are a really good way to use up those like micro scraps. I always like when I cut my ends off from my projects, I trim them down into teeny tiny little bits and really try and pull them apart, and I've got a big bag full. And when I'm stuffing toys, I tend to do a mix between either pillow stuffing or actual toy stuffing, and then some of that sort of remnant yarn filling as well. And the overall effect is like a nice firm but still squishy body. The one thing I would say with this is that the head is quite big compared to the rest of it. I think the way it looks is really cute. It's not necessarily proportionate, but I do like the look of like the giant head on the slightly smaller body. But as you'll see, like as you're moving it around, it does give the head a bit of a floppy tendency, and there wasn't really instruction in the pattern on how to attach the head in a way that made it not do that. Like, I'd have liked a little bit more structure in the neck, but just the way that you shape the head, there's not really an easy way to figure out how to do that. And the hole that you end up with in the body that you would then attach to the head when you're seaming it up at the end, it's quite small, and that's on mine where I've sized up. So I do think that that's probably the one bit where the toy lacks a little bit of structural integrity. But otherwise really cute, and I'm confident that my daughter's going to really like it. And yeah, I'm quite pleased with it. If she wants to show it to other people, I'll be happy to say that this is one that I've made. In terms of stats, I cast that on the 6th of January and I cast it off on the 31st of January, so it was on the hook for around 25 days in total, and I ended up using 165 grams of yarn for that one. So most of this is pretty scrappy. The beige was left over from a different project and the pink was left over from another project. I have counted cost for one of the skeins of the pink speckle because I had 1.5 skeins of that left in stash, so I'd already broken into one of them, but I did need one additional skein that I hadn't already used. Now, I didn't use the entirety of that, but because I had to break into a skein that I hadn't already used, and I don't think I bought it with anything specific in mind. I think that this is a funny thing about the way that I track things, of if I bought a yarn with a specific project in mind and I had a leftover ball from that project, I would consider all of that cost towards the original project that I cast on and finished with it. But if I just buy yarn and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, I just think, oh, this is nice, and I've bought it, then I would consider that cost when I'm looking at the cost of a project. So all that to say, in terms of the yarn cost, just one ball of the James C. Brett Flutterby, which is $3.99. And the pattern is free, so all in all it was $3.99 for a lovely little toy for my daughter. If anybody watched my last podcast, there's a section in there where I talk about how I like to have 3 whips on the go at any one time, and how I like them to have different functions, and it just offers me some versatility without me having too many projects on the go at once. And I need to formally retract that statement, because I am currently sat with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whips sat in front of me. Now, I will stand by the fact that I prefer not to have 6 whips on the go at once, because it's making me feel a little bit cuckoo. In terms of the whips that I have on the go at the minute, one that you'll recognise from my last podcast potentially is my Lusk Tee by Rebecca Clow. Now, you will notice that this looks very similar to the way that it looked in my last video. I'd gotten to the point where I'd got to the recommended length on the body, and I'd also gotten to the recommended length on the sleeves, having followed the instructions for the sleeves that had decreases in. And I just wanted to block the project before I put the cuffs and the hem on it. And I also said that I was hoping that this would relax a little bit in blocking, and that the body I was quite happy with the fit of, but that the sleeves were a little bit tighter than I was hoping them to be, and that ultimately, with this being a wool fibre, I was just hoping that it would just let out just a little bit. So I'm really pleased I did block it, because I blocked it and it didn't really change at all. So the fit is pretty much the same. I think the body is slightly more relaxed, and the stitches are definitely a little bit more even post blocking, but I didn't get any movement in the sleeves. They weren't any longer and they weren't any wider, and really it was that width that I was really hoping for. So what I've done there is just ripped the sleeves right back to where the decreases started, picked it back up. It's quite difficult to show because I do like to work sleeves 2 at a time, so both of them are on the same needle at the minute. So I've just put it back on the needle from the point where the decreases started, and I'm now just working back to the length with no decreases at all. But I think I'm about just over halfway through the recommended length on the sleeves now, reknitting them. And this is part of the reason why I've ended up with so many whips, because in my head I was expecting to block this, it to let out, and for me to come back to it to put some cuffs on the end of the arms and the hem on the body, and that would have probably taken me a few hours over the course of a few days, and then it would have been done. And so whilst it was blocking, I cast on another sort of main sweater whip, because I thought, well, this one's going to be finished soon, When it's finished blocking, I'm going to pick it up and just do some really simple ribbing, so that can be like mindless knitting. And while I've got a little bit of capacity, I'd like to get my next projects started so that I'm good to go once it's done. Ultimately, the blocking didn't go as I was expecting, and so rather than just putting some kind of like a 14-row cuff on each sleeve and a 14-row hem on the body, I have essentially got 2 whole sleeves to knit and the hem as well. So this is a much more involved whip than I was expecting it to be post blocking. And this is why I try and keep to just one main sweater whip, because I really just want to get through this now so that I can work on the next thing. I'm sort of already in that mode of working on the next one. And that is in Drops Fiesta in the shade 14, which I think is called Unicorn Sprinkles. I finished my Caroline the Cow. That was my crochet project. So I was in the market for a new crochet project. And so I have casted on the Yorkshire blanket, and this has been a really fun project for me because I don't really follow crochet patterns, and I found this to be a really good skill extender. I think the point of the blanket is that you're supposed to be building on skills with every different square that it gives you. So within the pattern there is 12 different granny square motifs, and the idea in the actual pattern is that you do each motif twice, and then you seam everything together, and then there's a really nice border included in the pattern as well. Because I'm making it as a baby blanket, I'm just going to do 9 of the different squares and then seam them together and then put that border on. And I've completed 4 of the squares so far. So here are the ones that I've done so far. I haven't skipped any of them so far. This blanket is going to be for my sister, and she's not finding out the gender of her baby, so we're not too sure what she's having. So we've gone with a nice sort of neutral cream, and then I might also add some sage green to the border, kind of a nice neutral colour, depending on how much yarn I've got. If I don't run out of the cream yarn that I've got, then I might just do the border in the cream as well. The yarn I'm using for this is Knitcraft's Make the Change. This is kind of like a weekend project for me. I like to do my crochet on the weekends and the evenings when I've got a little bit of time just to sort of concentrate on a project. I think I've said before, but I can't really multitask while I'm crocheting. When I'm knitting, that's something that I tend to do whilst I'm doing something else. So I might be listening to a podcast or an audiobook or watching something on the telly or on YouTube. But with crochet, if I'm crocheting, then that's basically all I'm doing, because it is a little bit more involved. And I think especially with a pattern like this where everything is different, you're not sort of getting into a rhythm. It's not like a standard granny square where it's, you know, 3 double crochets, chain, 3 double crochets, chain. So with every round of these squares being different, it is quite involved and quite difficult to sort of get into that flow state. But I think that the squares are really lovely, and I'm really enjoying all the new stitches. With not finding out the gender of the baby, what I was thinking of doing in terms of cutting the squares down, because there's obviously 12 squares in the pattern and I'm only looking to make 9, which means that there's 3 squares that I'm not going to be able to make. I think there's a few squares within the blanket that are a little bit more floral that I think might read a bit more feminine, and my plan is to just omit those ones, again to try and make a more gender neutral piece overall. Because I finished my checker plate hat, I also needed sort of a small portable whip that I could just throw in my handbag for waiting for doctor's appointments, the office, things like that. It's essentially just big, fuzzy white, not even square at this point. But this is going to be a stockinette stitch hood, and I've cast this on with 2 strands of a 4-ply merino that I don't know the name of. I got a 500-gram cone of this for £2 from my local yarn shop when she was having a bit of a clear out. I think it was originally from a D-stash, which is why it was so incredibly cheap. But I used quite a bit of this in my Like pullover, and then I think I've got about 200 grams left over, and so I'm holding that with a strand of Drops Kid Silk in the shade white, and again just doing stockinette stitch to make a hood. And the fabric is absolutely lovely. I think I'm using a 4mm needle, so it's quite a tight gauge really, because it's, you know, 2 fingering weights and a mohair together, so what's that, like a worsted sort of weight. But because it's a hood, I did want a slightly denser fabric, because I don't think it's going to be fully waterproof, but I do want it to be kind of thick and cozy and warm. And the idea is that this will be part of my sister's birthday present. It's my sister's birthday in a few weeks. She's very, very good to us, and so I like to treat her and she's got this beautiful sort of brown double-breasted coat with lapels, and it doesn't have a hood, and where we live I think it's best to have a hood, and she wears it for going out, so it's not really something that she'd wear a hat with. And so I thought if I could make her a hood to go with it, then that would just help keep her warm when she wears that nice coat. And so that's why I've gone for kind of the merino wool and the silk mohair blend, just to give it sort of a luxury sheen and a nice bit of fuzz. I think it, hopefully, I'm really hoping that it's going to be like a formal and nice piece for her. In terms of the pattern, I had a look at so many different hood patterns on Ravelry, and there were a few different ones, so I think I actually bought one of them. I can't remember the maker, but the pattern was called Bombec. And I think when I originally looked at the pictures I liked that, but I didn't ultimately cast that on because I didn't like that it was bottom up. I've only got one ball of the kid silk mohair, and so I want to work the project top down, just so that I can manage the yarn a little bit better. So I'm thinking of going for a construction where you cast on the square, sort of from the front to the back of the head, and then we're going to pick up stitches around and work down, and just see how much of the mohair I've got left at that point, because I'll then need to work a little bit of rib for the base of it, sort of the neck piece. I also prefer to have a double folded ribbed face hole, but I don't think I'm going to use mohair for that. So what I think I'm going to do is hold all three of these for the top of the hood and the sides. You know, for the neck and the face hole, they're a little bit closer to the skin. I might drop the mohair and maybe add in an additional strand of the merino. I do have quite a bit of this, and I think I'm probably going to have enough for me to do that. Both because I don't think I'm going to have enough mohair to do all of the finishings on it, but also because it's a little bit closer to skin and I'm not sure how my sister would react to mohair. I would rather that not be in any of the sections of the project that are going to be closer to skin to avoid irritation. So I think that's going to help me with yarn management and just with the overall finished piece and the usability of it. And then the next project that I've got, and you'll have to excuse me because I've got far too many things on the needles at the minute, I've had to move this onto a really, really hilariously short cable. Like literally, it just about fits on this cable with the stoppers on, and if I took the stoppers off, I would definitely lose stitches. But this is the back section of my Manu cardigan. And if you watched my knitting goals and make 9 video, which is the video I uploaded just before this one, you'll have already seen this, and you'll have seen it on a slightly longer cable because the lusk tee was still blocking at that point. So I've already raised a couple of concerns about this. So I've plugged quite a few hours into this. It takes me a really long time to do each row, and I've almost finished the back panel. So this is the majority of the back panel. I think I've got something like 17 rows left to do. So this is a drop shoulder cardigan with a combination of a half fisherman's sort of half brioche stitch and cable. So quite intricate work. And if you watch my last video, which was my knitting goals for the year and my make 9, I think you'll have seen me raise a couple of fit concerns about this. So as I said, it is a drop shoulder cardigan, and this panel has no shaping in it at all. With every other drop shoulder pattern I've worked so far, there has been some sort of short row shaping or an increase in technique to make a trapezoidal shape for the back panel, whereas this is just a straight rectangular piece. And so I'm a little bit concerned that I am going to get a little bit of bulk in the shoulders, but we're going to have to see as I cast it on. I suppose the thing that I sort of referenced in my last video was that the frustrating thing is with this construction, I'm not going to be able to tell if I'm having fit issues until I've got a decent amount of the cardigan finished. And by that point, the only way that I'm going to be able to rectify it is by ripping the whole thing out. Yeah, I'd be really interested if anybody's made the Manu cardigan before. Have you seen that there's any fit issues across the shoulders? Are you really happy with the fit? Is there something, because I've not read through the whole pattern yet, like later on in the pattern where you do a special technique to raise the back neck without having to do short rows or increases? So is it accounted for in some other construction method? Maybe I should read through the pattern and check that, but just a little bit nervous that I'm going to spend like upwards of 80 hours knitting a cardigan and then not be thrilled with the fit. So yeah, just a little bit nervous about this. I'm really happy with the yarn that I've chosen. I've gone for Drops Nord in the shade Red. My Instagram algorithm was serving me a lot of outfits last year where it was a pair of blue jeans, some form of a white t-shirt, and then a red cardigan and a red pair of Adidas trainers. And I just look like every single picture that was served to me, I absolutely loved it. And so I'm now in the market for some red trainers, and this is going to be the red cardigan to sort of go with the ensemble. Like I said, this was supposed to be sort of my main sweater whip now, but because the Lust tee didn't block the way that I was expecting it to, and as you'll see from the cable, I have now put this firmly on hold, and I'm planning on not working on this until I finish the Lust tee. That's really like my #1 priority, trying to get that finished and not let that languish, because I know myself, and if I just keep on working on this, I'll be like, oh, I'll just finish the back panel, and then I'll just pick up the left shoulder, and then I'll just pick up the right shoulder, and then I'll just finish this ball of yarn. Then I'll probably get to a point where I'm like, well, if I just tie in another ball, I'll get to the end of the body, and before I know it, I'll have a finished new cardigan, and my Lusk tee will have just been sort of languishing in the background, still unfinished. And I do also think that the Lusk tee is something that I think I'm going to wear quite a lot, just because it's a DK weight, so it's nice and kind of cozy for the weather that we've got at the minute. I think the colour is something that I'll wear a lot, and if I can get the fit right, I think it's going to be something that I'm going to be putting in sort of my weekly rotation. And it is so close to being finished. I think I've probably got a few more days worth of knitting on the sleeves, and then I've got the cuffs and the hem to do. So I think another week and I could have this done and in my wardrobe. Whereas this, like, I've only just started it. This is definitely a while off being finished, and so I'd rather finish the Lust tee, have that, be able to wear that, and then come back to the minnow cardigan once that's done. My 5th whip, now this is where I cheat myself, because I'm not really classing this as a proper whip, but it is something that I'm working on, and so it is a work in progress, and so it is a whip really. But because it's a repair, in my head it doesn't count, but then it is taken away from my knitting time. And so if I wasn't working on fixing this, I probably would have finished the Lust tee by now, and then I would have gotten on to working through the minnow cardigan, and I'm just getting into a little bit of a sort of traffic jam. So this is my Liqué pullover, and this was a finished object last year. It was the last thing I finished in 2025, and it had a few issues with it. So when I finished it, first of all, the sleeves were far too long and the body was far too short. So in terms of the repair job on this, I have done the sleeves. So originally these had 4 repeats on them, and I've now trimmed that back. I've sort of ripped out the last repeat, got it down to 3 repeats, and put the cuffs back on. And I'm much happier with the way that the sleeves fit now that I've done that alteration. And then I have also gone back into the body and altered that. So I've had to rip off all the ribbing. I think I did something like 13 centimetres of ribbing, so ripping that back was fun. And there's a couple of decreases towards the bottom just before you get into the ribbing. So I ripped all of that back, and I have added a repeat to this. One thing that I wasn't really anticipating with this project is, because I was shortening the sleeves and lengthening the body, I did think that I'd be able to recycle the yarn that I'd taken out of the sleeves back into the body, and I'm really, really pleased that I had some leftover yarn, because when I ripped the boucle out of the sleeves, there was absolutely nothing I could do. It was coming out in clumps and bits and pieces and just snapping constantly. There is absolutely no way you would have been able to reuse that. Thankfully, I did have, I think, 40 grams of the boucle left over, and that did end up being enough to add that extra stripe into the body. And I've still got some left over. I think I've got maybe 20 grams left over. I think I had nearly was it 40 grams? Yeah, I think I had 40 grams of the boucle left over, which was more than enough to add another stripe, which I'm really thankful for, because like I say, I don't know what I'd have been able to do if not. I'd have had to buy another skein, I guess. But I am now at the stage where the repair for the sleeves has been done, and I've added the additional repeat into the body, and I'm now just waiting to put the ribbing on. But yeah, that is the Liqué pullover, and I'm really excited to try and finish this, because when I try it on, I really like the way it looks. I like the way that the colour looks. I think it's really nice and cosy. It's really, really warm, and it's great for this time of year. And I just sort of look out of the window and see how cold it is, and I'm so frustrated that I don't have this sort of similar to the Lust tee. It's in the season now where it would be getting the most wear, and because it's not finished, I just can't wear it. So yeah, I'm really excited to finish both of these. And then where my main sweater whip has sort of gotten a little bit out of hand completely unintentionally. It's sort of a series of unfortunate events, if you will, where the blocking hasn't gone very well on one of my projects, and I've had to go back and make a repair on another one, and I've now suddenly got 3 different sweaters on the needles. My crochet projects are entirely of my own doing, and I have thrown caution to the wind this morning and spontaneously cast something on, which is not something I typically do very often. My partner buys quite a few things on Next, and so I've got the Next app on my phone. We get a lot of things for our little girl from there, so I get served a lot of Next ads. And on one of the Next ads that I got today was a picture of this apricot cardigan that's like a granny square cardigan. The first thing that I will know is I've had a really good look at the pictures. This does look to be genuine crochet, which we all know cannot be done by a machine. It has to be done by hand. And so whilst the £65 for a seemingly either cotton or acrylic cardigan seems eye-watering, I actually, I'm starting to see a bit of a trend, and I'm trying to move away from Next and a lot of their sub-brands, because I'm seeing that this is a recurring theme at this point, where they are jumping on the fact that the crochet thing is really popular, and they're releasing genuine crochet garments into their fast fashion stores, where it's absolutely impossible for the working conditions and the wages of the people that made them to be anywhere near what they should be. And something that's particularly rubbing me up the wrong way is that some of these pieces actually advertise the fact that they're handmade. And the particular piece that I've seen with a handmade label on it was £65, which I just think, if you're in the industry, if you're somebody that's trying to sell your knit and crochet handmade pieces, seeing fast fashion brands sort of advertise that somebody has handmade this thing and they're selling it for such a low price, it's too much. All that to say, I saw this picture of this cardigan and I was instantly intrigued, and I instantly thought of some yarn that I already had in stash. So again, if you've watched my last video, you'll have heard me talk about how I had 3 balls of drop spell in the shade white in my stash. I've actually gone back and it's actually 4 skeins, so I've got 200 grams of this, and I was intending to supplement this yarn and make a salty day sweater. I'm still thinking of making a salty day sweater. I'm still actually thinking about making it in this yarn, in the drop spell in the shade white. But I also have some other scraps of drop spell knocking about in my stash that I think if I use some of the 4 skeins, or maybe all of the 4 skeins, to make this cardigan, I'm getting rid of a lot more out of stash, and then I can just treat myself to a sweater's quantity of the drop spell to make the salty day sweater. And I actually think, because this is a scrappy project, I might have a ball or so of this left potentially, and so I can still possibly incorporate some stash yarn into the salty day sweater. But I'm also open to the fact that I might use up all of my drop spell in the shade white in this project, and then I'm totally at peace with the fact that I would then have to buy a full sweater's quantity for that. The colour palette that I've gone for is very much inspired by the photo. So in the photo you'll see there's sort of a deep blue, sort of a beigey creamy colour, and then a white. So I've already showed you the white. I've gone pretty much on the nose with the beigey colour because I have this shade 3, which is sort of like a sandy beige. It's a little bit cooler. I've got another creamy colour in my stash, which I did try in this, but I didn't think there was enough contrast between that and the white, and I also thought it was a little bit buttery, whereas this is a teeny tiny bit cooler. It's still a beige, but it's a cooler beige than you typically see. And then in terms of the blue, I had 2 different shades. So I've got some of the navy and some of a lighter blue. And I originally tried it with the lighter blue, which is shade 15. And I was really happy with it. I have tried the sort of navy-ish colour as well, and I still prefer the lighter blue, which I'm happy with because I've got 3 skeins of the lighter blue, and I think I've got something like 12 skeins of the navy blue. The project that I've got in mind for that navy blue is the Nosty Tea, which isn't out yet, but that's by Rebecca Clow. And I've got enough of that to make that, but I don't think I'd have had enough to make that if I'd have also incorporated it into this project. But I've got a perfect amount of this, and it's not something that I'm going to use for another project. So pleased to get rid of this. pleased to get rid of this. I think I'll be able to get rid of the majority of both of these. I'm actually a bit touch and go on the amount of this, and I'll be a little bit annoyed if I have to buy a whole new skein just to sort of finish off this project when I'm trying to get it out of stash. But enough talk of the yarn. Here is where we've gotten to, and I've literally, I would count this as maybe a swatch. So this is how I tend to work with crochet. I don't tend to buy crochet patterns. I tend to see ready to wear garments, have a quick look at them and go, could I make that? And that's how most of my crochet projects have come to fruition. So this is just sort of the center square, and then I've got to go around with a few more times. When I've had a look at the pictures, there is, it looks like there's 16 squares in total. So 2 squares for each side of the body. So 4 on the front, 4 on the back, and then 4 on each sleeve. So it's 2 for the length, and then it's doubled. And then it looks like it's all seamed together with like a mattress stitch at the end. The way the construction worked in my head, I thought that you would seam it all up, like the back would be seamed up in a square and then the shoulders would be seamed up. But actually it's seamed up perfectly on the shoulders, but then it's only seamed up like 3/4 of the way on the back by the looks of it, and then you carry the button band around like that. I think that just makes it a little bit more upsetting that it's £65, because the construction looks to have been really, really considered and really clever, and the thought that the artist that's made these cardigans, and these artists have had to design these cardigans and probably make hundreds of them, because it's a fast fashion brand, that like I say, it just upsets me. And yeah, I just thought it'd be a really nice piece for a British summer where you still want a little bit of a layer, but you don't want it to be too warm because it's full of holes, and because it's like that cotton linen blend. I just thought that it would be the perfect mix of like a nice summer light layer. And it's something that I'm excited to work on now. If I work on it now, then it'll be ready for when we get a good bit of weather. The weather's always a little bit unpredictable in the UK, and so it's quite nice to have your summer and spring pieces just ready to go for when summer decides to hit. I've had some people raise concerns to me around, oh well, you know, if it's a finished garment and you're just sort of ripping it off, is there not ethical concerns with that? And to those people, I would say that in my opinion, there are far few ethical concerns regarding me replicating a mass-produced garment that is made by a brand who exploits their workers than there is about a brand exploiting their workers. Like, if that brand didn't exploit their workers, then maybe I would buy from that brand. Like, admittedly, a handmade crocheted garment, even paying living wages in some of the foreign countries that these are made in, I still don't think that you would get a price that a lot of people would be able to pay. It certainly wouldn't be a fast fashion price. But if somebody commissioned me to make a cardigan like that, there would definitely be at least 3 figures in the price tag. Like, when I weigh up the cost of the yarn for this, it's really, really cheap to make in terms of the materials. But like I say, this isn't even half of a square, and I have to make 16 of these. I predict that these squares are going to take me multiple hours each, and then once you finish the squares, you've got to seam them all up, and then you've got to add any finishings to the neck and the cuffs and the hem. So the fact that they're being sold for £65, genuinely, like, I'm ranting now, but it really, really, really winds me up. So yeah, that's everything that I've got for you this week. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope if you did enjoy watching that you'll come back and watch me next time. Hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see what's coming next, although I do upload every other Sunday at 9 o'clock UK time. And don't forget to let me know if you've made them a new cardigan, and if you've got any fit concerns, and how you feel about this whole crochet debacle with the fast fashion industry. See you next time. Bye!